Chuck, thanks for that, but I'm not getting it. What is something independent? What's it all about?
Can you repeat that, please?
What's something independent? I'm not quite seeing it.
We're done. I told you, we don't share that.
Folks, thanks for joining us again on The Juice. My name is Kyle Eason, founder of Inception Integrated Marketing, and we are here today on a beautiful day at Battery 621. Well, I want to welcome you, Chuck, to the show, to The Juice. And Chuck Sullivan is the founder of Something Independent. We're going to learn a bit more about what Something Independent is all about, and about Chuck and what's next for Something Independent. So Chuck, maybe you could tell us a bit about your own background, your personal and professional background. What brought you here today?
Well, how long we got?
We've got all day.
Well, that's great. So I'm gonna maybe
make yourself comfortable.
Sit back. It's Friday. It's a little afternoon. Cheers.
Cheers, folks.
Well, my professional career began shortly after college when I moved to Telluride and lived just outside of town in a tent with two pals from college, a big old Army issue canvas tent.
Literally a tent.
Yeah, a tent. And I think I had 4 jobs that summer. The longest was dishwasher at the Roma, which is now the co-working space, the Telluride Mountain Venture Summit and TVA co-working space. It's crazy. I was just down in Telluride for this Mountain Venture Summit down there, and where I wash dishes is now like a Battery 621. It's like crazy. And then the shortest job I had was at Rose's Market as stock boy, and that was about 20 minutes. So,
how did that end?
Well, actually, I think that might have been a defining moment in my career, in that I feel like I handled it fairly professionally. And during the interview, they were very clear with me. This is summer, we were in a tent, that they were looking for someone to stock shelves and unload the food trucks coming in, but they needed someone there for the ski season. And I said, absolutely, I will be here for the ski season. And I showed up the next day. The truck was supposed to be there at 9 o'clock. I was there at 9 o'clock sharp. The truck was not there. I was handed a rag and described how to appropriately sort of dust cans, dust cans, pull them forward, and then restock from the back. And it was terrible. I just could not. I was like, this is awful. My friend Daphne, who helped me get the job at the market in Telluride, I was like, Daphne, this is terrible. She's like, Chuck, come on, I just sing to myself, and of course we're in Telluride, right? Of course she sings to herself and registers people and dusts cans, and I'm like, all right, Chuck, don't be a pussy, come on, you can do this. And another 5 minutes go by, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. And then I tried to talk myself into it, and finally I said, this isn't gonna work. So I went into the owner's office and kind of knocked and poked my head in. She's like, what's going on? What can I help you with? I'm like, I don't think this is gonna work out. She's like, after I told her I'd be there through the ski season. And she said, well, what are you gonna do? I said, I think I'm gonna leave now. And we looked at each other, and I handed her the rag back that she had handed me 20 minutes prior, and we kind of agreed that if it wasn't gonna work, it's best to end it early.
There you have it.
So, anyways, I can get into more of my background, but
okay. That is interesting, and
But-
you're right. Yeah, be direct. I think that was right. Be authentic.
But no, I can sort of share a little bit more about maybe career path that sort of
Yeah.
has led to what is now Something Independent.
Yeah.
And after Telluride, I took my dishwashing skills and moved over to Ireland actually for a little bit and waited tables over there, traveled, ended up back in Steamboat for a little bit. So I did the ski bum thing for a little while, and then felt like it was time to get a real job and ended up in San Francisco. And I'm going to date myself, but this was 1991, 92, and I ended up working with Jerry Brown, now governor of California, and his presidential campaign
I remember that.
in 1991, 92. It was a very crowded Democratic field. And of course, Bill Clinton emerged as nominee and ultimate president. But I spent almost a year and a half, 2 years working with Governor Brown, and it was one of the more interesting experiences I ever had. Like sharing hotel rooms with him, and you know, it was a real grassroots effort.
You stayed in touch with Governor.
You know, no, not directly in touch, but sort of indirectly through colleagues. And but you know, I just was kind of just thrown to the wolves a little bit, and was all across the country, and everything from media and communications and coalition building and sort of just grassroots, boots on the ground, relationship, sort of, you know, like that kind of stuff. And actually going into like real communities and talking with real people across the country is just an eye-opening endeavor, you know, like to go out of your environment and out of your element. And from the West Coast, the East Coast, the Midwest. And I ended up in Washington, D.C. after that, and worked for a campaign consulting group. And I didn't love it. I worked 2 years and intended to leave and come back to Colorado, where I grew up here. And they said, why don't you take 6 months off? And I jammed a bunch of stuff in a backpack and left the country for 5 months with a good buddy of mine, and backpacked and tented through New Zealand and Southeast Asia, came back, and you know, the guys, I had my job back, so they said, take 6 months off. So I did that, stuck around DC for another kind of 2-year cycle, and I just couldn't do the candidate political thing. You know, it was just too, even that long ago, it was so divisive and
Toxic.
And that time, packed up my truck, drove out west, picked up a buddy of mine who was in Lander, Wyoming, working for Knowles, and did a big loop around Montana, you know, Wyoming, out to the West Coast, and all the way down to Southwest, Tucson, and drove back to DC, got my stuff, and came back to Colorado, and continued to do, I guess, initiatives and campaigns, communications, but nonpartisan in nature. So that's a little bit of the background, and there's actually a little bit of not a little bit, but a lot of a connection into the thinking behind, you know, how and why Something Independent was originally launched.
Maybe you could tell us a bit more specifically about that launching and what Something Independent really is.
Yes, yes.
And by the way, we were kidding about Chuck walking out, but
Yeah,
it can be a little difficult to grasp. What is Something Independent about?
Well, I think it will help maybe to start with the first part of your question there, and sort of the origins of it and the thinking of it.
Yeah.
It was, so this is 2008 into 2009, on the heels of the 2008 Democratic National Convention that was here in Denver when former President Obama was nominated here. That, you know, the world descended upon Denver and Colorado for that convention, which was historic, of course, with the first African American president, and, or who would become the first African American president. And it was, business, global media, and political leadership from around the world were here. And regardless of political persuasion, I think the world began to see Colorado in a different light, that there's something unique, there's something happening here or on the cusp, and this isn't a place to just go ski and camp and vacation, that there was something here. And it was right at that time that the SIA Snow Show, which had been in Las Vegas for 25 years, or plus I think, announced it was moving it to Denver for a 10-year run. And myself and my co-founder, Johnny Klein, we really saw this as sort of this aha moment of like, this convention opened a lot of people's eyes from, like I said, global business and media and community leaders from across the world. But that was one and done. That's not what Colorado is or is about. But now all of a sudden you've got an industry coming here for 10 years that it is not just a bunch of skiers and boarders, but it's founders and owners, designers, manufacturers, and they're in an industry that is sort of unique in a lot of ways to Colorado, or at least what it's known for here. But what we would see too, and I think what now with the Colorado Office of Outdoor Recreation Industries and kind of the sort of the elevation of the profile and the impact and the influence of the outdoor industry today, we sort of saw something there and had the chance to go to then Governor Ritter and his head of economic development at the time and say, hey, here's who's going to be here, and these are the kind of people who they're sort of inclined to be bold and pioneering, and they're kind of inclined to be sort of out-of-the-box thinkers, entrepreneurial in nature, willing to explore, and why don't we find a way to engage them outside the four walls of the convention center? And the initial reaction was, great, we're going to do that, as the Office of Economic Development, as Chamber, as whoever, and we kind of pushed back and said, there's a better way to do that, and said, you're going to be a little bit hampered by the fact that you're wearing that suit, you're wearing that tie, you've got your name tag on, and the first thing you did was pass out 2 business cards when you came in. This is a community that likes to get business done over a beer, on a chairlift, or on a bike ride. And so hence, Something Independent was born as really an initiative or a campaign to celebrate and showcase the entrepreneurial spirit across Colorado, but through that lens of that outdoor-inspired founder, athlete, advocate, entrepreneur. And we launched with a whole 3-year series of panel discussions called The Economics of Soul. We had folks like Ben Anderson, this is 2010, from founder of Icelandic Skis, the head of CEO of BOA Technology, on panels with soon-to-be Governor Hickenlooper, former Senator Udall, and so anyways, that's where we got our start, and I think that's why Something Independent gets pegged a little bit with being somewhat of a forerunner to what is now the Colorado Office of Outdoor Recreation Industries, headed up by Luis Benitez, who is an amazing champion for the industry. So anyway, so that's sort of the backstory, anyways.
I think it's kind of coming together for me a little bit. It's I can see it having roots in your public relations or political background, convening groups, getting to know people, what they need, helping them come together around certain issues. And you're doing that with a number of other you're partnering with other organizations to make these things happen throughout the year. And I've seen on the Something Independent website some of those events like TEDx Mile High, Denver Startup Week, Millennial Trains Project, things like that are just part of the portfolio for Something Independent and the work that you're doing partnering with other people. Does that make sense? Am I catching on to some
it's been, an interesting progression for ourselves. You know, when we started, we really envisioned this as a what might be a 3 to 5 year really public awareness initiative in partnership with the state of Colorado and then private sector partners to sort of bring some energy to, you know, this kind of conversation and maybe create and fuel connections for founders and entrepreneurs in the outdoor industry. But like as it progressed, we really shifted from this mindset of a campaign to like, let's make this a company and something independent company. And, you know, like along the way, you know, I think, you know, for me, where this is today, it's gone from these sort of like iterations of these sort of not mission statements, but taglines from this promoting the industry and culture of snow sports in Colorado to inspiring leadership at the intersection of lifestyle and commerce to, you know, really today what SI is doing. It's really like this is about getting behind that culture of carving one's own path and frankly backing this very notion of giving a shit. Truthfully. And it's through our programs like the Wright Trade School, the SI Outpost, that, you know, if we can bring people in contact with sort of like real people in resilient communities who are doing what we consider real work, that there's a certain trickle-down effect. You know, we get a lot of, you know, emails after programs like the Wright where folks are like inspired. They're like, they sort of see themselves in Deerhammer Distilling Company or Vintage Overland Trailers or Bonsai Design. You know, they can look at them and be like, I can, that's me, and I'm ready to do this. And
is the energy behind Something Independent fundamentally entrepreneurial in that way?
Well, it's interesting. So yes, at a lot of levels, but I also think that, you know, one of the things at Something Independent, it's like, how do we just strip things down to what they are at the core? And this is just a community of doers. And for some, that's, you know, the entrepreneur. But for me, it comes down to, you know, are you doing good work? You know, do you do it as a for-profit? Do you do it as a not-for-profit? You know, technically you wouldn't take an organization like First Descents, which is, you know, a not-for-profit, call them entrepreneurial, but if you look at where they started as a one-person shop by Brad Ledden up in the Vail Valley, and they've expanded down to Denver, and they probably have, you know, close to 20 full-time employees, and they expand it in the summer, you know, tenfold when they're doing their programs across the country, and they're going into communities where they're doing kayak trips and ski trips, and they're driving business through local shops and things like that. I mean, like so anyhow, you know, I sort of appreciate the question. I think contextually, you know, there's something to that sort of entrepreneurial spirit, but it's also sort of boils down to, you know, leadership in this fashion that I sort of call. It's just, you know, like we look for these qualities that, you know, that I describe as bold, principled, committed, and collaborative. Kind of that Something Independent mold of leader. You know, and they're hailing from communities that, you know, are, we see the DNA as sort of very independent by nature, resilient, but not independent at the sake of anyone else. It's also this kind of first to the barn raising mentality.
It seems like Something Independent is adding fuel to that fire.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's really indicative of a mindset that is prevalent across the Rocky Mountain region. You know, that's been a big shift for Something Independent as well, is, you know, while we started as this very, like, you know, the heartbeat of this is here in Colorado and to celebrate Colorado company, you know, we pretty quickly realized that this is, it's alive and well here, and this is our home. You know, you take a company like an Icelandic Skis, you know, who was here in Battery for many years, and has now moved to Golden, when they come across, someone doing their thing in Bozeman, in Boise, in Bend, in Carbondale, but anyways, you get my point. It's really this is kind of mindset that does not really know any borders per se, but it is really rich here in the Rocky Mountain West.
And what's the next phase for Something Independent? What next steps for you?
Well, so much of the Something Independent, fairy dust, I think, has been in, a couple things. One is that what I was just talking about. It's like, if you can kind of put sort of real people doing real work, sort of on stage and showcase what they're doing through content and convenings and programs like the Wright. And so we want to do more of that, because we've seen this trickle down effect, and you can't always sort of put your finger on it per se, but we surround ourselves with network partners. So when we get that email the day after the Wright that says, "That's it, last night was incredible. I got to be next to 12 contender companies from across the Rocky Mountain region, founded by people who are just doing their thing, people who are doing their thing in this capacity of, sort of subscribe to this notion of, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to do my work, and I'm going to go about it in this way." Mm-hmm. And so more of that. And in doing so, I think, we're going to continue to look for ways for Something Independent to, I call it maybe formalize some of the informal collisions. And that's the fairy dust to which I was kind of referring to, some of the kind of the informal collisions, and that again happen over a beer, a chairlift ride, a bike ride, that kind of thing. But just for example, like surrounding the Wright in Golden in May, we've begun a partnership with the Colorado School of Mines, wherein each year over the course of the year, a selection of Wright companies will have the opportunity to pair and partner with teams of student engineers to address innovation challenges within this sort of outdoor inspired industry. So envision bonsai design, adventure tours, zip line, fabricator, manufacturer, designer based out of Grand Junction, partnering on sort of this cohort or innovation project that develops new hydraulic braking systems for zip line tours. Imagine Icelandic Skis partnering, just down the hill from School of Mines. Imagine them partnering with student engineering teams to develop, non-petroleum based new composite materials for, ski equipment, skis, and to do those kind of things where Something Independent can bring, I think, a little bit of energy and some soul to what would otherwise be a great initiative, but how can we bring some culture, build some community, and allow people to sort of celebrate the thing that is Something Independent within them.
And to learn more about Something Independent, what is your web address, or where would you send people?
Well, shit. Our web address is technically somethingindependent.com. But we're not too bad at telling other people's stories. We're not always the best at telling our own. So we've got a new website in the works.
Great.
The other place people can go right now too is, the Wright is really is like, that's coming up May 1st through 3rd in Golden, and the Wright.co. And
Wright.co.
Yeah, and Wright with a W, And Wright
Yep.
as in shipwright, like
Okay.
maker, builder.
Playwright.
Like that's where that comes from exactly. If
Yeah.
you, I had to do this actually just to make sure, you know, but you Google Wright with a W in your machine, and it comes up, maker, builder. So,
Chuck Sullivan, thank you so much. Thanks for
Kyle.
joining us on The Juice. That was a great conversation. Looking forward to hearing more about you and Something Independent going forward. And yeah, I think we did it. Thanks.
all right, cheers to the juice.
Cheers. Thanks. Take care. Thanks.